The alien city never slept. Tall towers touched the sky, glowing with cold blue light. Streets were filled with shadows, neon signs, and strange voices. Merchants whispered, buyers bargained, and secret things were sold in the dark corners. In this city, humans were rare. They were not free, not respected, not trusted. To the aliens, humans were dangerous yet also mysterious. Some called them cursed, some called them holy. But to most they were simply tools to be rented or sold. One widow walked through the crowded market that night. Her cloak hid her face. Her steps were quick. She had lost her husband in the last war. She had lost her home, her honor, and her place in society. The only thing she still carried was her grief. And her secret plan. She stopped at a door without a name, only a red light above it. Glowing like a wound, she knocked once and the door opened. Inside was silence, heavy and sharp. Rows of cages stood in the room, and inside those cages, humans. Some were weak, some were broken, some looked empty. They stared at the ground, waiting for orders, but one was different. He sat straight, calm, his eyes like steel. He did not beg, he did not move. He simply watched her. The merchant came forward, his voice oily and false. "Widow, what do you want tonight? A worker? A fighter? A companion?" She shook her head, her eyes locked on the calm man in the corner. "That one," she whispered. The merchant laughed. "He is expensive. He is not like the others." But she only repeated, "That one." The bargain was made quickly. Gold changed hands, the cage opened. The man stepped out without fear. He followed her into the night. The city lights burned around them, but between the two, there was silence. She brought him to her small house at the edge of the city. It was cold, lonely, filled with dust and broken memories. She offered him food. He ate little. She offered him water. He drank slow. He never asked questions, never spoke a word. Yet his eyes followed her every movement. It was like he already knew her. As the night grew deeper, the widow felt uneasy. Why did she choose this man? Why not one of the broken ones who would obey without thought? There was something in him, something hidden, and she could not understand it. Her plan was simple yet dangerous. She needed him for one night only, nothing more. But as she sat near the dim lamp, she felt his presence stronger and stronger. He was not just a man, not just a human. He carried a weight, a silence that pressed against the air. It was like the city itself bent around him, like even the shadows listened when he moved. Finally, she broke the silence. "Why do you not speak?" she asked softly. The man only looked at her, his eyes dark, and then, slowly, he leaned forward. His lips moved, his voice low, heavy, strange. He whispered a single phrase, a phrase in her own alien language, a phrase no human should ever. "No, stay forever," he said. Her heart froze, her breath caught. How could he know those words? Those words were sacred, spoken only between bonded souls. Her husband had once whispered them to her on their wedding night, and now this human spoke them with the same weight, the same power. The widow pulled back in fear. Her hands shook, her mind raced. Who was this man? How did he know? Was he truly human or something else? The lamp flickered, the air grew heavy, and she felt, for the first time in many years, not just fear, but also hope. In that dark room, the bargain no longer felt simple. It no longer felt safe. It was no longer one night. Something larger had begun, something she could not escape, something she could not stop. And as she lay awake, her heart trembling, the human sat silently, his eyes never closing. The city outside roared with noise, but inside only his whisper remained, a whisper that echoed again and again in her mind. Stay forever. The widow could not sleep that night. Her heart still shook from the human's words. She had heard them before, long ago, from her husband. But now they came from the mouth of a stranger, a man she had only just rented. And worse, he spoke them in her alien tongue, a language humans were never taught. She lay on her small bed, staring at the ceiling. The human sat on the floor, his back against the wall, silent as stone. The shadows moved across his face as the lamp flickered weakly. She wanted to ask him how, why, who he really was. But fear sealed her lips. So she turned her face away, closed her eyes, and let the night drag her into restless dreams. Morning came with pale light slipping through broken windows. The widow woke with a strange heaviness in her body. Her hands trembled as she pushed herself up. Something inside her felt different, alive, moving. She touched her stomach and froze. It was impossible. It could not be. But she felt it. A pulse, inside her that was not her own. The human stood now, tall and calm, watching her. He said nothing, yet his eyes seemed to speak. 1,000 unspoken words pressed against her mind. She stumbled back, whispering, "No, it is too soon. It cannot be." Her kind could only carry life after long rituals, after bonds, after years. Yet she had spent only one night with this human, and already life had sparked inside her. She wanted to scream, to deny it, but instead, tears burned in her eyes. She had thought she chose him for her plan, but maybe it was he who had chosen her. The thought made her chest heavy, her breath weak. "Who are you?" she finally whispered, her voice shaking. The man tilted his head, and for the first time he answered, "Human," he said simply, but his tone carried more weight than the word itself. The widow's fear grew sharper. Strange things began to happen in her house. The door creaked open, though no wind touched it. The broken lamp flickered back to life on its own. The air felt thick with unseen energy. Her neighbors whispered outside. Rumors of the widow who had taken a human spread quickly, and in their whispers danger hid like a knife. She tried to keep him hidden. She pulled the curtains tight, spoke to no one. But still, people watched. Strangers slowed their steps near her house. Eyes glowed in the dark alleyways. She could feel the city pressing against her walls, and inside, the human grew stronger, his silence heavier, his presence larger, like he was more than just flesh and blood, like he was waiting for something. That night when the city finally slept, the widow lit a small candle. She looked at him, her voice breaking. "Why me? Why my house? Why my life?" For a long time he did not answer. Then he leaned forward, his face half shadowed by the candle flame, and again he whispered the same impossible words, "Stay forever." Her tears fell silently. The words wrapped around her heart like chains and wings both. She wanted to hate him, but her chest ached with something else. Something warm, something dangerous, something she had not felt since her husband died. Hope. Suddenly, a loud knock shook the door. The candle trembled. The walls echoed. The widow froze, her breath sharp. The human stood, his eyes hard as stone. Another knock, louder this time. A voice from outside thundered, "Widow, open the door!" By order of the city guard. Fear filled her veins. If they saw the human, they would take him, chain him, maybe kill him. Her neighbors must have reported her. The rumors had reached the enforcers already. The widow looked at the man, desperate. "What do I do?" she whispered. The human stepped closer, his hand gentle on her shoulder. For the first time, he spoke more than a single word. "Trust me," he said, his voice calm, unshaken. And then, without touching the door, it unlocked itself. The widow gasped. The wood creaked, the metal lock clicked open. The enforcers outside pushed in, tall figures in armor, their weapons glowing. But the moment they stepped inside, the air shifted, their lights flickered. Their weapons hummed and died. The guards froze in confusion, fear crossing their faces. And in that silence, the human's eyes glowed faintly in the dark. The widow could not believe what she saw. The enforcers stumbled back, muttering. One whispered, "He is not just a man. He is—" But before he could finish, the walls shook. The candle went out, and the room filled with a cold wind that came from nowhere. The guards fled, tripping over each other, running into the night. The door slammed shut behind them with a crash. The widow stood shaking, staring at the human, her lips trembled, her knees weak. "What are you?" she asked again, her voice breaking. The man only looked at her, and softly once more he whispered, "Stay forever." The city never forgave secrets. Rumors spread like fire through the narrow streets. By the second sunrise, everyone whispered about the widow. They said she had broken the law, taken a human into her home. Some said she was cursed. Some said she was desperate. But one rumor grew louder than all the rest. They said the widow carried a human child. The widow stayed inside, her hands trembling every hour. She could feel the life moving within her, faster than any normal child should grow. Her kind carried for years. Yet she felt her body change in days. It frightened her, but it also filled her with strange hope. The human stayed close, silent as always, his presence strong like a wall between her and the world. She wanted to ask him again and again who he really was, but each time, fear kept her quiet. At night, when the house was still, she would hear the whisper inside her head. It was not the human this time, it was the child. Soft, gentle words that touched her thoughts. "Mother," the voice said, "I am here." She cried alone in the dark, both afraid and amazed. Never before had a child spoken before birth. Never before had life grown this quickly. She began to believe. Her child was not ordinary. Her child was something the world had never seen, but the city was watching. Neighbors' eyes followed her windows. Strangers lingered outside, and soon the rulers of the city heard the whispers. A widow carrying human blood was not just scandal, it was danger. The council declared such a union forbidden. They sent watchers, spies, and enforcers. They wanted to see the child destroyed before it was even born. One evening, the widow lit a single lamp. Her hands rested on her stomach. The human sat nearby, sharpening a broken blade he had found. She whispered, "They know they will come for us." The man did not look up, but his calm voice filled the silence. "They will not touch you," he said. His words felt like stone, unshakable. But the widow's heart trembled. She knew the council's power, she knew their cruelty, and she knew if they feared the child, they would burn everything to kill it. That night, sleep came heavy. But in her dreams, the widow saw fire. She saw armies, marching, chains rattling. She saw her child glowing like a star in the darkness, and behind it all she heard the whisper again, "Mother, danger comes." She woke in sweat, clutching her stomach. The child moved inside her, strong and alive. And she knew the dream was not just a dream, it was a warning. By morning, soldiers stood in the street. Neighbors pointed, voices rose. The enforcers knocked on her door with iron fists. The widow froze, her breath caught. The human stood, tall and steady. His eyes, sharp like fire, without fear he moved toward the door. She grabbed his arm, whispering, "No, they will take you away, they will kill you." But he only looked at her and said, "Trust me." The door crashed open, enforcers filled the room, their weapons bright, their armor heavy. They pointed at the widow, shouting, "By order of the council, you are accused of carrying forbidden blood." Her heart shattered, tears filled her eyes. She stood protectively in front of her stomach. But the human stepped forward, placing himself between her and the soldiers. He did not draw the blade, he did not move to fight. He simply stared, and the room fell silent. The air grew thick, heavy, sharp. The lamps flickered, the walls shook one by one, the soldiers' weapons dimmed and went dark. Their armor creaked as if squeezed by invisible hands. Fear spread through their ranks. Some dropped their weapons. Others stumbled back. The human's eyes glowed faintly, like fire hidden in shadow. And with a single word, he broke the silence. "Leave," he said. The enforcers fled, their boots echoing against the stone streets. The door slammed shut behind them, sealing the silence again. The widow fell to her knees, shaking, her breath short. She looked up at him with wide eyes. "What are you?" she whispered. The man turned, his face calm, but his eyes deep with power. "Human," he said again, but the word carried something more, something unspoken. The widow touched her stomach, feeling the child move stronger than ever. She realized the council would not stop. They would send more soldiers, more fire, more death. Her child was not only forbidden but also feared, and now she understood why. This child was not just blood of human and alien. This child was something greater. A bridge, a weapon, or maybe a savior. That night, as the city whispered and soldiers gathered again in secret, the widow sat close to the human. Her tears had dried. Her fear had hardened. She whispered to him, "If they come again, we cannot stay. We must leave this city." The man looked at her, his voice low, steady. "We will," he said. She felt both dread and relief at his answer, for she knew once they stepped beyond the walls, there would be no turning back. The candle burned low. The child stirred, and the widow heard the voice again in her mind, soft but clear. "Mother, I will protect you." Her heart broke and healed in the same moment. She pressed her hand against her stomach, she whispered back, "And I will protect you." But deep inside, she wondered how long she could. For outside her door, the city was already preparing for the night when the council would no longer send enforcers, but an army. The city grew darker each night. Whispers turned to shouts. Shouts turned to orders. The council no longer trusted enforcers alone. They gathered soldiers, hunters, even bounty seekers. The widow's house became the center of silent hate, and everyone knew soon the storm would break. Inside the small home, the widow packed what little she owned. Her hands shook as she placed food, water, and a single blanket into a bag, the Yai. Human watched her, calm as always, his eyes never blinked, his breath steady. Finally she asked, "Why are you not afraid?" The man looked at her for a long moment. Then he spoke. "Fear is a chain. I do not wear chains." Her heart tightened at his words. She wished she could be like him, unshaken. But her fear was not for herself. It was for the child. Every hour, the child grew stronger inside her. Every night she heard its voice clearer. "Mother, we must leave," it whispered. And she knew the child was right. At sunset, they heard boots outside, dozens of them, heavy, cruel. The widow peeked through the curtain and saw soldiers gathering in the street. Their armor glowed, their weapons charged. She gasped and turned to him. "They will burn the house. We cannot fight so many." The man stood, picking up the broken blade, but his voice was calm. "Then we leave." The back door creaked open. They slipped into the narrow alley. The city was alive with light and sound, drums of war, horns of alarm, the shouts of soldiers echoing through every corner. The widow's heart pounded as she clutched her stomach. The human walked ahead, steady, his figure like stone in the storm. Every step they took, the city seemed to move against them. Shadows shifted, torches burned, eyes followed, but none dared block their path, not when they saw the glow in his dark eyes. They reached the outer gate. Tall walls stretched high, guarded by towers. The widow whispered, "We cannot pass. They will stop us." The man stepped forward, unflinching. Two guards lowered their weapons, shouting, "Halt! No one leaves without the council's mark." But before their weapons could strike, the torches around them flickered out. The air grew heavy. A pressure fell over the gate. The guards staggered, choking, dropping their weapons to the ground, and the gate unlocked itself with a thunderous groan. The human looked back at her, his voice firm. "Walk." They passed into the wastelands. The city lights faded behind them, swallowed by the night. Ahead lay endless ruins, broken ships, rusted machines and sand that glowed faintly in the moonlight. No one lived there. No one dared. It was said the wastelands were cursed, haunted by old wars. But for the widow and her strange human there was no choice. It was freedom or death. They walked until her legs burned, her body ached, her breath ragged. But the human never slowed, never stumbled. He moved like he had walked this path many times before. At last they reached the skeleton of a broken ship. Its metal bones twisted, its doors half buried in sand. The man pushed it open with ease. Inside was darkness. but it felt safer than the city. Here, at least, there were no eyes, no whispers, no soldiers. The widow sat against the cold wall, clutching her stomach. The child moved again, stronger, brighter. And then she heard the voice in her head once more. "Mother, danger is near, but he will protect us." She looked at the human, silent, sharpening his blade with a piece of stone. He seemed calm, almost too calm. She wanted to ask him again what he really was. But before she spoke, he lifted his head as if hearing something far away in the distance. Horns sounded. The widow's blood turned cold. "They are following us," she whispered. The human nodded, his eyes narrowing. "They will not stop," he said, "but neither will we." He stood, his figure tall against the broken ship's doorway. For the first time, his calm felt less like peace and more like war. She pressed her hand against her stomach. Her voice broke as she whispered to her child, "Stay strong." The child answered with warmth, "I am strong, because of him." Tears filled her eyes, but she forced herself up. She would not let fear break her now. She would not let the council take her child. Not while this man stood beside her. Night fell heavier. Stars drowned in clouds. The wastelands howled with cold winds. But the widow walked step by step, guided by the human's steady pace. Behind them, the sound of marching grew louder. Soldiers. In the distance, torches burning like angry eyes. The chase had begun. The widow's heart beat like a drum. Every step echoed like a warning, and yet she felt a strange fire inside her. For the first time since her husband's death, she was not running alone. The human walked before her. The child whispered within. Her and the wasteland stretched endless before them. The city was behind, but war was coming. And in that war, their secret child would decide the fate of both worlds. The wastelands stretched endless under a pale moon. Sand whispered against broken ships, rusted towers, and the bones of old machines. No one called this place home. No one dared. It was said the ground still remembered war. It was said the sky still carried the screams of the dead. The widow walked, carefully, her cloak wrapped tight around her. Her body ached with the weight of the unborn child. Every step felt harder, every breath heavier. But the human walked ahead without pause. He moved as if the wastelands were familiar. As if he had walked here before many times long ago, they reached the ruins of a giant ship half buried in sand. Its metal walls were broken, its towers bent. Yet when the human touched its door, the metal shifted. Lights flickered faintly. Alive for the first time in years, the widow gasped. "How do you do this?" The man looked back at her, his face calm. "Because I remember," he answered. Inside, the air was stale, but strange machines lined the walls, silent, waiting. The widow followed, her fear growing. Each step echoed like a whisper. Her child stirred inside her, and then she heard the voice again. "Mother, this place knows him." She froze, her hands pressed to her stomach. What did the child mean? What was this man to the dead machines of war? The human placed his hand on a console. At once, the ship's heart came alive. Lights glowed, wires hummed, and screens lit with symbols in a language the widow could not read. She stepped back, her voice shaking. "You are no ordinary human." The man's eyes glowed faintly in the blue light. He said nothing, but his silence was heavier than words. That night they rested inside the ship. The widow lay on a broken seat, her mind restless. The child whispered softly, "He carries more than blood, he carries memory," she whispered back. "What memory?" But the child gave no answer, only warmth. She turned her eyes toward the man. He sat by the console, watching the stars through a crack in the ship's roof. His presence filled the room, steady, unshakable. And yet, it frightened her more than the council ever had. By dawn, the wastelands woke with storms. Winds howled, dust filled the air. The widow clutched her cloak, coughing. But the human walked calmly through the storm, and the storm seemed to bend away from him. The widow's eyes widened as the sand shifted aside, leaving their path clear. "What are you?" she whispered once more. This time he turned to her and spoke. Not what you fear, not what you hope, but what you need. Her heart pounded at his words. She wanted to press him for truth, but before she could, a sound cut through the storm. Engines harsh and heavy. The widow's blood ran cold. The council had sent hunters. Strange machines crawled over the wastelands, glowing with cruel light. Soldiers rode upon them, their weapons ready. They had found the trail. The human stopped, standing tall against the storm. His eyes burned brighter now. The widow panicked. We cannot fight them all, we must run. But the man only raised his hand. The machines slowed, sparks flew from their sides. The soldiers shouted in confusion, their weapons failing. The widow covered her mouth in shock. The human was not fighting with steel. He was fighting with something unseen, something deeper, older. The hunters retreated, their engines smoking. The soldiers dragged them back toward the city walls. Fear spread among them, stronger than their orders. The widow trembled, staring at the man. "Machines obey you," she whispered. He looked at her calmly. "They remember me." Her knees weakened, her breath shallow. If machines remembered him, if they bent to his will, then he was not simply human. He was something greater, something ancient. They moved deeper into the wastelands. At night, they found another ruin, an old tower leaning against the sand. Inside, strange lights pulsed faintly. The child whispered again, "Mother, this place is safe, for he is home." Tears filled her eyes. What kind of father had she given her child? What kind of destiny waited for them both? The widow sat close to him, her voice low, almost broken. "Tell me the truth," she begged. "Who are you really?" The man looked at her with eyes that carried weight of ages. For a moment silence held long and deep. Then he said softly, "I am human, but not as you know. I was made for this world, long before your people claimed it." Her breath caught. Her heart felt as if it had stopped. He was not just a wanderer, not just a man. He was part of the ancient war. He was the memory that the machines carried. And now, he had passed that memory into her child. The widow clutched her stomach. Tears fell fast. The child whispered, "Do not fear, mother, I will protect you as he protects us." But the widow knew the truth. The world would not let such a child live, the council would never stop. And somewhere beyond the wastelands the war was already waiting. The human stood, his voice calm, steady as stone. "The time will come. And when it does, you must be ready." She looked at him with trembling eyes. "Ready for what?" she whispered. He turned to the broken tower, his shadow stretching long against the sand. "Ready for war," he answered. The council could no longer hide their fear. The whispers of a widow carrying forbidden blood had grown into a roar across the city. The people spoke in fear, in anger, in awe. Some wanted the child destroyed. Others whispered it could be a savior. But the rulers only saw danger. They gathered their armies, their ships, their machines of war. The wastelands would burn until the human and the widow were gone. Far beyond the walls, the widow sat inside the broken tower, her body weak, her child strong. Each day the child grew faster. Each night, its voice grew clearer. "Mother, the storm comes," the voice whispered. She trembled as she stroked her stomach. Her eyes turned to the man, standing silent at the tower's doorway. His shadow stretched long against the sand. He had said nothing for hours, only watching the horizon. Finally, she asked, "Do you see them?" The man nodded, his voice calm. "They are coming." The widow's heart raced. She had known this moment would arrive, but now that it had, fear gripped her like chains. She whispered, "They will kill us." The man turned to her, his eyes glowing faintly. "They will try," he said, "but they will not succeed." At dawn, the horizon burned with light, not the light of the sun, but the fire of ships. Dozens of war machines crawled over the sand. Towers of metal moved like beasts, their weapons charged with cruel energy. The council had sent an army. The earth shook with their approach. The sky thundered with their engines. The widow clutched. Her child, tears in her eyes, she whispered, "How can we fight them?" The man stood tall, lifting his broken blade. His voice was low, steady. "We do not fight with fear, we fight with what they cannot understand." The army surrounded the tower. Trumpets of war sounded, voices shouted, soldiers pointed weapons. At the ruins, the widow pressed against the wall, her breath shaking. But the man stepped forward, calm as stone. He stood at the broken doorway, his figure alone against the army. A commander shouted, "Human, surrender. The widow will be spared if you give yourself." The man did not move, did not answer. The commander shouted again, "You are forbidden. Your blood is poison. Your child is death." Still the man was silent. The air grew heavy. The sand trembled. The machines of war shuddered as if remembering something. And the widow felt the child stir inside her, its voice soft. "Mother, do not fear, we are not alone." The first shot was fired. A beam of burning light cut through the air toward the man. But before it struck, the light bent, twisted, and vanished. Gasps rose from the soldiers. The machines groaned, their engines faltered. The man raised his hand slowly, and the earth itself seemed to obey. The sand rose like a wave, crashing. Against the war machines, soldiers screamed, their lines broke. The widow watched in shock, her heart racing. This was no ordinary human. This was something far beyond. The army fired again, their weapons blazing. But the blasts curved away, swallowed by the air. The machines shook as sparks rained from their sides. One by one, they collapsed into the sand. The man's eyes glowed brighter now. He whispered, words too soft for her to understand. But the machines understood. They fell silent like children obeying an ancient father. The widow fell to her knees, clutching her stomach. The child whispered, "Mother, it is not only him. It is me too." Her heart shook. "What do you mean?" she whispered. The child answered, "We are bound. His power flows through me, and mine through him." Tears blurred her vision. She realized her unborn child was not simply alive. It was already awake, already powerful. A bridge between two worlds. The soldiers panicked. Some fled, some dropped their weapons. But the commander screamed, "Do not retreat, kill them, kill the child." He raised his weapon, pointing it toward the widow. Her body froze, her breath stopped. But before the shot could fire, the human moved. In a blink, he stood before her, his blade raised, the weapon shattered against an unseen force. The commander fell back, his face pale, his courage broken. Silence fell across the battlefield. The army stood trembling, their weapons useless. The machines lay dead, the air heavy with dust and fear. The man lowered his blade, his voice echoing through the wastelands. "Go back to your masters, tell them this child will not be broken." His words rolled like thunder, shaking even the bravest hearts. The soldiers fled, dragging their commander. Their torches vanished into the horizon, leaving only silence and ruin behind. The widow collapsed against the wall, her tears falling. Her voice shook as she whispered, "You protected us, but they will come again." The man looked at her, his face calm. "They will come with more, but they cannot stop what has begun." She clutched her stomach, the child moving warmly within. The voice whispered again, "Mother, I will protect you too." Her tears fell harder. This was not just her fight anymore. It was the fight of her child, of the man, of something far greater than the council. That night, the stars burned brighter. The widow sat by the broken fire, staring at the human. He sharpened his blade slowly. Calm as always, she whispered, "Why do you stay? You could leave. You could walk alone." The man lifted his eyes, and for the first time she saw something softer there. "I stay because I said it once," he whispered. "Stay forever." The wastelands were silent after the battle. Broken machines lay half buried in the sand. The smell of smoke drifted in the cold air. The widow sat against a wall of the ruined tower, her body weak, her child restless. The man stood outside, watching the horizon with eyes that never closed, but silence never lasted in a world ruled by fear. The council could not accept defeat. They gathered their full strength, ships larger than cities, soldiers more than numbers, weapons that had ended worlds before. Their leaders swore the child would not live. They swore the widow would not live, and they swore the human would be buried forever in the sand. The widow felt it before she saw it. Her child stirred inside. Her, its voice soft but certain. Mother, they come again, greater than before. She clutched her stomach, her heart heavy. She whispered, "We cannot survive such a storm." The human turned his head toward her, his voice steady. "We will," he said. By night, the horizon glowed with fire. Dozens of ships darkened the sky, their engines roaring like thunder. The ground shook with the march of endless soldiers. The council had brought everything. It was no longer a hunt. It was war. The widow trembled, fear burning in her chest. She pressed her hand against her stomach, whispering to her child, "Stay with me, do not leave me." The child's voice returned, clear and bright. "I will not leave, I will shine." The man stepped forward, his broken blade in his hand, but his eyes carried more strength than any weapon. The soldiers surrounded the ruins, their torches blinding. Their commander raised a hand, shouting, "This is your end, human. This is the death of your blood." The man did not answer. Instead, he closed his eyes. The air grew still heavy. The stars above flickered as if holding their breath. Then the child moved. The widow gasped, light spilling from her body like fire made of life. It was not painful. It was warm. It was powerful. The child spoke again, but now its voice was not only in her mind. It echoed across the wastelands. "Do not fear, mother. Do not fear, father." The soldiers stumbled, their weapons shaking. The commanders shouted in confusion, and then the light burst outward, a wave of pure energy brighter than the sun. Machines collapsed in an instant, their engines silent forever, weapons shattered. In soldiers' hands, the very ground split with cracks of light. The council's mighty army was broken before it even struck. The widow cried out, covering her eyes, but the human stood firm, his figure glowing in the storm of light. It flowed through him, around him, from him. He lifted his blade high, and for a moment it shone like a star. Then he lowered it, his voice rolling across the battlefield. "You call this child forbidden, but this child is the future. Your chains are broken." The soldiers fell to their knees, some in fear, some in awe. Their commander dropped his weapon, his voice shaking. "No, no one can stand against such power." The man stepped forward, calm as always. "This is not power," he said. "This is life, and life cannot be chained." The council's ships trembled in the sky, their engines failing. One by one, they fell like burning stars into the wastelands. The night shook with fire, but the ruins stood untouched. The human and the widow stood at the center, their child's light shielding them. And when the fire faded, silence returned, but it was no longer the silence of fear. It was the silence of an ending. The war was over. The widow fell to her knees, tears streaming. Her hands clutched her stomach, the child's light fading to a soft glow. She whispered, "You saved us, but at what cost?" The man walked to her side, kneeling slowly. His eyes were calm, his voice steady. "There is no cost for truth," he said. "The world must change, and the child is the beginning." She looked into his eyes, trembling. "Will you leave now?" she asked, her voice breaking. He reached out, his hand warm against hers, and he whispered the same words he had spoken that first night. "Stay forever." Her heart broke and healed in the same breath. The child stirred again, its voice soft and bright. "Mother, father, we are together. We are strong." The widow leaned against him, closing her eyes. For the first time since her husband's death, she felt peace, not because the danger was gone, but because she was no longer alone. The wasteland still stretched, endless. The ruins still stood broken. The city would whisper for generations, but none would forget the night the humans stood against an empire. None would forget the forbidden child who glowed brighter than war, and none would forget the whisper that became truth. Stay forever.